Well, I think in the short term, both China and Russia benefit from this war. Just to take the Russian case, sanctions have been lifted off the selling of Russian oil because we, the United States, have a vested interest in getting as much oil into global markets as possible. Furthermore, the longer this war goes on, the less weaponry the United States has to give to the Ukrainians, which obviously works to the advantage of the Russians. And I could tell similar stories about the Chinese, mainly the fact that we're pivoting away from Asia to the Persian Gulf, which works to China's advantage. But the problem is that we run the risk here of wrecking the world economy, and that will be a tremendous blow to both China and Russia. And I think China and Russia and almost every other country on the planet, except for maybe Israel, is profoundly scared about the possibility that the world economy is going to go off a cliff. And that prospect gives everyone, the Chinese and the Russians included, a powerful incentive to shut this war down. Now, I think there's no question that China and Russia can put and have put pressure on Iran to settle this war. I think that's especially true of the Chinese. And the Chinese have been talking to the Pakistanis and working with the Pakistanis to get them to act as mediators. But in the final analysis, the Iranians are not going to bend to pressure from China or Russia. The Iranians are going to do, as they should, what is best for themselves. The Iranians understand that they operate in a self-help world. And furthermore, they understand that the two states that they're opposing in this conflict, Israel and the United States, are genocidal states. And if you're dealing with two genocidal states, you better do what's in your own security interest and not take what the Chinese and the Russians say too seriously. Again, you don't want to ignore them, but at the same time, I think from Iran's point of view, they have to do what's in their interest. So there are limits to how much pressure the Chinese and the Russians can put on them. Again, my bottom line here is it's not until the international economy begins to approach the precipice that we're going to get any real movement to put an end to this conflict.
Interesting. Trita, please feel free to respond to John. But I also wanted to ask you about Pakistan's role in all of this. Professor Mearsheimer mentioned that it's the Chinese that is pressuring and that are pressuring Pakistan to act as intermediaries. How do you see Pakistan's role? Does it have the capacity or the leverage to shape the current negotiations? There was a time when people thought that perhaps they were pushing America's agenda. Of course, the Pakistanis denied that completely. How do you think the Iranians view Pakistan's role in all of this?
Look, at the end of the day, the Iranians have welcomed the Pakistanis playing this role. They have not raised a fuss about having the meetings somewhere else. And they want to have a strong relationship with Pakistan. In the background, there are other states that are helping the Pakistanis, the Omanis, the Qataris, because at the end of the day, they have far more experience in mediating between the US and Iran. Pakistan is very new to this game. But Pakistan stepped up and has played a role. It's been called helpful. I've heard it from both sides that they're happy with it. But we have to understand at the end of the day, it's not the Pakistanis that are going to resolve this issue. This has to be resolved by the Iranians and the American side, or because there's some other entity that pressures both of them into some form of agreement, and that's not going to be Pakistan. That would be, as I think John alluded to, it would be the Chinese at the end of the day. But the Chinese are not going to do it at this point. In fact, they have pushed Iran a little bit, but it's not also their style to go in too aggressively. And if they were, I'm not necessarily sure that they were going aggressively pressuring the Iranians more so than pressuring the United States. They're not going to foolishly make themselves an instrument in Trump's pressure strategy with Iran because they don't believe in it. We saw, for instance, that the Iranian foreign minister was in Beijing just in the last 2 days. And I think he tweeted something along the lines that they trust the Chinese. And I think that's a very significant statement that was made there. The Chinese also are finding themselves in a situation in which a bit of the dynamic in their relationship with Iran has changed. Clearly, the Iranians need the Chinese, but Iran also now has a bit of a leverage over the Chinese. And they're not going to be shy exercising it. They have been offering the Chinese discounted oil for more than 10, 15 years now at a rate of 15 to 20% as a result of sanctions. And they have become extremely dependent on China as one of the few places that still buys a lot of this. So they're more than happy to continue a very strong relationship with China, but they don't want to be that dependent on the Chinese.